Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. This is Joe, the bearded historian. He'll tell you an interesting story. Be careful of his soldiers, they can be brats. This is Angel, she's an entity. She'll cause chaos and plant her hands at you. This is Sue, she likes spirits, not the alcohol. She's the reason this channel exists. This is David, he likes fire trucks. He's here occasionally. Bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong, bing bongy bong. We preserve his story. Wayback Wednesday, we're just going to talk about a very hilarious thing that I think I saw happen in the history of the United States, because we are crazy people. But before that, we're going to have our shout out. Are you ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. This shout out is for our friends. Let's see what it is today. Okay, as you see, I have chosen a food race. You look at the title of the video, you'll see why. We've got Heather, we've got Mountain Man, we've got Martin, and we've got 755, we've got Baked, we've got Hillbilly, Carnivore, Lynn, Jamaica, Wright, Martin, Jessica, let's see, Treasure, Gypsy, Neil from the back, Wreath from the back, Louise, Rich Cat, Alice, She Stole, there's Hiking, and it's going to be Boyd. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, description, sports cards, and guitar. So we've got lots of pack opening, some shorts here with cards and stuff, and of course playlist. We don't have any lies, but that's okay. So like cards or guitar, check them out. Like, share, comment, have a good day. Alright, Mr. Ben, tell us a story.
Okay, class. Everybody, get out your lunch pails. Just kidding. Today we're going to have an interesting topic, but it's going to start with a little history, like everything I always talk about.
No.
But the big thing for most of us who are going to be eating, it circles around bread. In this case, sliced bread. Now, for that matter, you think about bread, its origins, it dates back about 30,000 years. And, from the culinary staple as it was mostly discovered, domesticating plants and ways to grind grains like wheat, barley, sorghum, rice, and maize to produce flour. The ancient form of bread was cooked over open flames or hot stones. Well, the Greeks introduced the concept of leavening bread using yeast. They also invented bread ovens. They could be preheated, and these were freestanding with a door for access. Well, following in the footsteps of the Greeks, the Romans refined bread making further and popularized public bakeries. And during the Middle Ages, bread became the staple of diets for people of every class. Now, over time, bakers had complicated bread making, creating fluffy, flavorful varieties. You go to any grocery store nowadays, and you'll see everything from loaves, regular elongated bread, to round options, sourdough loaves, just all sorts of fun little things. An early loaf of bread would look foreign to most modern consumers, took on various shapes rather than even loaves, and contained whatever ingredients were on hand. To eat it, you would tear off a piece or chunks, hence the expression, break bread together. Well, people continued to tear off bread in their own kitchens until the 20th century. Modern! Now, the catalyst for such an interesting story had to be the intriguing man, Otto Frederick Rodwetter. Was nothing short. He lived from 1880 to 1960 and was born in Davenport, Iowa.
Well then.
Now, after his public schooling, he became a jeweler's apprentice and went to post-secondary school and earned a degree in optics from Northern Illinois College of Ophthalmology and Otology. However, when he went to work as a jeweler in line with the trade where he apprenticed, eventually he owned 3 jewelry stores. Well, despite his day job, Rodwetter was an inventor at heart. He tinkered with his jewelry products to devise clever new machines. He decided he wanted to invent a bread slicing machine. In a leap of faith, he sold his jewelry stores for capital, and he created a promising prototype. Sadly, he then suffered a devastating loss. In 1917, a fire in his factory destroyed his blueprints and his prototype.
Whoops.
It'd take another decade before anyone would sell sliced bread. Well, Rodwetter continued to improve on his vision despite the 1917 fire. By 1928, he had created a 10-foot-long metal box with a row of sharp blades that would be used to slice and wrap bread. After conducting research to determine the perfect bread thickness, he settled on half-inch slices. He applied for patents and sold his first bread maker to Frank Bench, his old friend and a baker in Missouri. Now, the machine stayed in Bench's Chillicothe Baking Company, where he began to sell sliced bread. Thus, Missouri is home to the first pre-sliced and packaged bread sales. Now, Rodwetter sold a second machine to baker Gustav Pamperdink, who found his way to improve it. Pamperdink figured out how to keep his slices together as the machine wrapped them, placing them in a cardboard tin. This kept the slices fresh longer. Now, in 1928, the Chillicothe Constitution Tribune, where the baking company was located, published an advertisement with the headline, "Sliced bread is made here." The advertisement references the power-driven multi-blade bread slicer capable of performing an impossible feat: sliced whole loaves of bread at once. Now, this was the first ever reference to sliced bread in print. It offered instructions to the consumer, suggesting you should open the wrapper at one end and pull out the pin to access a slice of bread. It also called sliced bread the greatest forward step in the baking industry since bread was wrapped. Before long, major baking companies joined the trend in making sliced bread. Within a few years, bakeries were producing more sliced loaves than unsliced loaves. Now, Rodwetter sold his patent rights to the Micro Westo Company of Iowa, where he led the Rodwetter Bakery Machine Division. There, he helped sell his device to more and more bakeries. He remained little known. Despite his huge impact on the American culture, he did not become rich or famous for his invention. He lived a quiet life in Louisiana with his wife and 2 children and retired at the age of 71 and passed away 9 years later. In his lifetime, he received 7 bread slicing technology patents, and his original sliced bread machine remains in the Smithsonian Institution Bearing Center. Now, when sliced bread made its debut, people were unsure what to think. With its long-standing reputation as one of the best inventions ever, you'd think it would be popular right away. In reality, it took a bit of convincing to get bakeries and consumers on board with the sliced bread. In the early 20th century, pre-sliced bread was a novel, strange idea. At first, sliced bread received mixed reviews. Consumers thought the early bread slices looked sloppy, and they were wary about them going stale too fast. Remember, this is before food contained preservatives. A sliced loaf was bound to go bad before an unsliced loaf would. Improvements in machine packaging by Rodwetter, Pamperdink, and others helped solve this issue. Now, soon, Americans grew to love sliced bread's convenience, especially the housewives who made breakfast and lunch for their families. Readily available Wonder Bread, with the dots, everybody remembers the colorful dots, was the most popular. Uniform bread slices made it much easier to make a few sandwiches for your children's lunches or pieces of toast for breakfast. As a result, people began eating more bread. This trend continues today. In 2020, over 236 million Americans used bread, and more than 335 million are expected to use bread in 2024. That's a lot of bread and a lot of people. Now, another impact of the sliced bread was the increased popularity of the toaster. Believe it or not, the toaster was invented before sliced bread.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. In 1893, Alan McMasters of Scotland created an electric device he called the Eclipse toaster. You can imagine why it had limited success, given that sliced bread was not yet invented and electricity itself was not widespread. After all, when was the last time you used a toaster for something other than bread products or toaster waffles, which wouldn't be invented until 1953?
Yeah, and Pop-Tarts weren't a thing yet.
No. Now, several inventors improved on the toaster idea over the next few years. In 1919, Charles Strife debuted a toaster with a timer and a spring, which he sold as the Toastmaster in 1926, 2 years before Rodwetter invented the sliced bread machine. A few years later, when sliced bread became popular, Toastmaster's sales shot up. Now, almost every American kitchen is equipped with both a toaster and a loaf of sliced bread. Now, aside from toasters, many other products are surprisingly older than the sliced bread. Some of these, like the word robot. The word robot was first mentioned in 1920 in a play by Czech playwright Karel Čapek. The first actual robot wasn't invented until 1954. Lie detectors. The first lie detector was invented in 1921 by a medical student at the University of California named John Larson. Sadly, they didn't use it on politicians. And Kleenex, the world's first facial tissue, was invented in 1924, 4 years before people started enjoying the convenience of sliced breads. Other machines, such as the electric bulb, the telegraph, and the fax machine, were invented at least a half a decade before sliced bread. And during the same year that sliced bread was invented, there were some more notable inventions, among them the development of the antibiotic penicillin by a Scottish doctor and bacteriologist Alexander Fleming. It was also the same year that British inventor John Logie Baird demonstrated the world's first color television transmission. Now, since its invention, the sliced bread had become a universal symbol of innovation and convenience in the modern industrial age. The popular item, the greatest thing since sliced bread, is a way to show enthusiasm and appreciation for something or someone. This expression originated as an advertising tactic for a new invention in the baking industry. It's possible that the Chillicothe Constitution Tribune advertisement started the trend when it called sliced bread the greatest step forward since wrapped bread. Now, sliced bread made life more convenient than ever before. It's no wonder that decades later it was used as a reference for inventions that made a huge impression. Now, in 1933, Evansville Press publication appeared to be the first to use a variation of the greatest thing since sliced bread item. The Walsh Baking Company calls the Golden Toast the first improvement since sliced bread. In 1934, Bell Bakeries used the quote, "the most progressive step in the baking industry since sliced bread," to describe their freshness-dated bread. Then in 1939, another quote surfaced in the Lafayette Journal and Courier. An advertisement from Ruger's hailed their pantry-packaged twin-style bread as the newest thing since sliced bread. Now, across the country, sliced bread was becoming the point of comparison for innovation and general greatness. As such a common advertising slogan, the expression entered common speech in new ways. For a few decades, people began using the expression to show admiration for people, not just products. In 1951, American journalist Dorothy Kilgallen quoted her sister calling an actor the greatest thing since sliced bread. The actor in question was heartthrob Hollywood star Stuart Granger, who played a role in the film called King Solomon's Mines. This was likely not the first time someone used this expression in this fashion, but is the earliest instance that it appears in print. An ironic play on the common marketing tactic became part of the everyday language. Today, you'll find that expression in English-speaking item dictionaries and glossaries. Now, sliced bread's grip on society became more evident than ever in 1943. During World War II, the federal government rationed and banned certain products as a way to preserve resources. Now, due to the War Food Administration, consumers could only buy products like meat, cheese, and sugar using state-issued ration coupons. One target of the resource conservation efforts was sliced bread. Now, at that time, the Secretary of Agriculture, Claude R. Wickard, banned pre-sliced bread in bakeries and homes. No bread for you. And on this date, in 1943, hotels, restaurants, and railroad dining cars could continue selling sliced bread for 60 days. But the government's goal was to preserve wax paper, wheat, and steel, and to reduce bread prices for the consumer. Interestingly, there was no shortage of either wax paper or wheat at the time.
How did steel get involved other than the cutting slices?
That's what I'm thinking, the blades.
But
Now,
how often do they have to replace those? Like once a year?
well, I'd say once every 5 years, depending on how
My
often
point
they
is
get
that
dull.
seems silly to include steel when they're not going to be using that much steel.
Yeah. It said bread companies had enough wax paper on hand to last for months, and the nation had a surplus of wheat bushels. Now, the idea that the sliced bread ban would conserve steel made little sense. Here you go. As bakers could use the same bread slicing machine for many years. At best,
Right.
the ban would conserve a minuscule amount of resources.
See, I knew it.
And even though the ban was supposed to reduce prices, it was very unpopular with consumers. Duh.
Because you took away a convenience.
Yeah.
Now they have to slice it themselves.
Yeah. By 1943, consumers had grown accustomed to the sliced bread's convenience, and when the government passed the ban, housewives scavenged for bread knives, which were soon in short supply. Those who found bread knives were no happier with the result. One housewife, Sue Forrester of Connecticut, became a spokesperson for the Americans' discontent on the ban. She wrote to the New York Times saying sliced bread was important to the morale and saneness of the household,
I don't know about that. That seems a little extreme.
and that the hand-cutting dozens of bread slices every day were a major waste of time and energy.
Now that I can agree with.
That I can see. Now, bakeries were not any more content than consumers. The ban led to sales drops and lost profits. Some bakeries continued to slice their bread, facing steep fines as a result. Just 15 years after its invention, sliced bread had become a necessity for any bakery to sell. Well, the War Food Administration lifted the ban about 3 months after placing it. This was due to a combination.
That's a long time.
Yeah, due to the ban's minimal helpfulness and the public outcry it inspired. When the government lifted the ban, the New York Times ran an article saying, "Sliced bread back on sale.
Woo!
Housewives' thumbs safe again." Sure enough, Americans have grown to love sliced bread. Now, sliced bread's convenience has made it popular around the world. A slice of loafed bread looks different depending on where you live. You'll find regional variations in size, cooking methods, ingredients, flour types, and size thickness. Of course, many cultures specialize in flatbreads and tortillas, such as the Indian naan and the Armenian lavash. Then there's some different distinctions between sliced bread varieties in different countries. The United States, the United Kingdom, and even Japan. In sliced breads in one's home country, you can find the standard loaves about 20 to 24 slices. Each slice is usually 3/8 to 5/8 inches thick. That is unless you're talking Texas toast. There we go. Which is sliced about double the average thickness. You can also find thin sliced options with more slices per loaf. I've seen some of those.
I don't think I've ever seen any of those.
It's like 3 slices an inch. They're really small. Now, the United States is home to a wide variety range of different sliced breads, and the grocery store's bread aisle often contains dozens of choices. Regardless to your personal taste and dietary restrictions, you can find sliced bread for you. Now, in the UK, bread is often labeled thick, medium, thin, or extra thick. Now, leading brands include the Warbuttons, Hovis, Kingsmill, and Tesco. Sliced bread is more useful for more than sandwiches. In the United Kingdom, a common light meal is beans or eggs on toast. A recipe book by Tonya George features dozens of different ways to enjoy foods on toast. The book's title, Things on Toast, Meals from the Grill, the Best Things in Sliced Bread. Now, in Japan, sliced bread is a little different. Shokopan, or eating bread, is a sliced white bread that serves as a neutral backdrop for the rest of the meal. Japanese bread is usually sliced thicker than Western loaves, with anywhere from 4 to 10 slices per loaf. Standard sliced bread loaves are not usually made for sandwiches, but on toast, which is why they tend to be so thick. And for the same reason, vertical pop-up toasters are much less popular than toaster ovens. You can also find thinner sliced sandwich breads. In some bakeries, consumers can specify the number of slices they want in their loaf. Now, through the ages, bread making has come a long way since the days of early civilization and the decades following the invention of the sliced bread machine. Baking has changed by leaps and bounds. Today, industrialized processes allow bread making to be done faster and done on a larger scale and more uniformity than ever before. Today's bread also has a much longer shelf life thanks to the added preservatives. The dawn of large-scale manufacturing affected everything about the daily life. One key bread-making revolution was the invention of the Chorleywood bread-making process in 1961. This process, developed at the British Baking Industries Research Association, makes bread-making faster and allows for low-protein wheat. It also makes slices softer, more uniform, and longer-lasting. This process is useful for baking and any yeast-leavened bakery products. It modifies the dough's protein structure with dough conditioners and high-speed mixing. The mixing takes under 5 minutes, and the dough conditioners might include a variety of oxidizing agents, emulsifiers, and enzymes. Oxidizing agents improve gas retention during proofing and may include ascorbic acid or potassium bromate. Meanwhile, emulsifiers lengthen the shelf life, and enzymes boost yeast activity. As a result of these changes, the dough is stretchier and retains more gas as the yeast ferments. Now, this process takes greater quantities of more consistent end products, so you can see why it has become popular. Today, the mass-produced breads are made with Chorleywood process. It offers quick, unchanging results every time, which makes bread much easier to sell. Now, since the sliced bread age, the invention of preservatives have changed the way people produce, buy, and consume food. Preservatives are chemicals that inhibit food deterioration. Without preservatives, microorganisms, and oxidation make food go bad more quickly. We discovered this with a loaf of bread in our kitchen one day.
Yes.
3 main categories of the preservatives include antimicrobials, antioxidants, and chelating agents. Now, antimicrobials, as the name suggests, fight things like mold and bacterial growth. Some examples include potassium, calcium, and sodium. For yeast-leavened bread, antimicrobials have to be gentle on yeast. In this case, the best option is calcium and sodium with an active propionic acid. Antimicrobials, as useful as they are, present certain challenges. They often require the acidic conditions and, in large amounts, can alter flavor and smell. Antioxidants delay the oxidation of fats and oils. This helps prevent discoloration. And some common antioxidants include ascorbic acid, butylated hydroxysolide, and butylated hydrotoluene. The latter two are common in butter and shortening. Ascorbic acid, containing vitamin C, also acts as a dough strengthener when oxidized. And chelating agents, or sequestrants, help bind metals that can cause oxidation. The most common is citric acid, EDTA, and polyphosphate. Each is colorless, odorless, and tasteless, so they don't affect the way baked goods look, taste, or smell. They keep food fresh longer and controlling trace metals. Now, added preservatives are useful and important. They often keep food edible for longer periods of time, which often allow the consumer to buy in bulk and shop less often for perishable foods. In the same way, they help decrease food waste. However, if you're looking to appeal to that all-natural consumer, you can look for certified USDA organic products. These products cannot contain artificial preservatives, with some necessary exceptions. But that was kind of our little trip back into history. So basically an effort by the War Department to take and ration sliced bread turned out to be a botched idea in under 3 months. But folks, you have a good week, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.
Enjoyed some sliced bread.